Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday evening. My name's Chirag, and this is Viet. And yeah, we're really stoked to have everyone here today. We know you probably have a long day at work. It's quite late. And yeah, we're really excited to share on this really important topic today. And before I start, just want to say a huge shout out to all our colleagues and friends in the states which are suffering a lot right now with current circumstances. We're especially down south, up here in Queensland. Touch wood, we've been all right. Viet and I are in Brisbane at the moment, and yeah, so just our thoughts are with you, especially Sydney and Melbourne. From what we can see in the news, talking to a few friends down there, it seems like things are pretty rough at the moment. So yeah, our thoughts are with you, and hopefully things get better real soon. Pass on to Viet.
Cool. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Just so you know, at the bottom, depending on what device you're using, there's a chat button. Feel free to send in messages, especially if something sort of hits the mark or resonates with you. We'd love to hear it. And there's also a Q&A button as well. So feel free to send in questions. You can make it anonymous as well, and we'll get through the questions at the end. Obviously, we'll pick the ones that sort of come up quite often, quite commonly. And yeah, and we'll see how much time we've got at the end to go through it. Obviously, it's late already, but yeah, thanks again for joining us. All right, so to get started, obviously, we're here just to have a chat about mental health and well-being in the dental industry. What we're going to cover tonight, we just broken down to 3 separate sections. One is about what mental well-being is and why it's important, especially in dentistry. And hopefully we can share some practical tools that you can all start using straight away, and then also go through how it can affect our communication and connection with others, especially in the dental team. Why are we here? Well, I think for us, it's about shedding some light on a topic that's often unspoken about in the industry. Like, we sort of all know about it, we sort of joke about it, but I think it's something that the time has come for us to really, spend some time and sort of start sharing a bit more about what we're all going through, I guess. And I think our goal is to hopefully put a focus on the human beings at each dental practice, I guess, and sort of bring an awareness and acknowledgement of the qualities that make us human. And hopefully by understanding a bit more about ourselves, we can, and other people as well, we can develop that compassion for each other and ourselves. So when we've looked at dental practices and the mental health and well-being in dental practices, we've sort of broken it down into 2 parts. One is the individual well-being, like each person, and then the other part is the team well-being and how connected they are. And these, while they're separate, they sort of influence each other. So normally if it's a great team environment, you'll find that when you go in, you feel better, and then that feeds back into the team. So it's a bit of a cycle, right? For us, it's something that, the only part that we have influence over or total control is the individual well-being. So ideally, if we had everyone in the team working on their individual well-being, then the team will naturally improve, I guess. So that's why a lot of the topics, a lot of this discussion tonight will be focused mainly about the individual. So before we get started talking about, mental health in general, we always like to share a bit of our story and what mental health means to us, and I guess why we're so passionate about it. And for me, I graduated from UQ in 2005, and it's only in hindsight, like looking back now, that I realized when I graduated, I suffered a bit from imposter syndrome, and with that carried a lot of anxiety about not being good enough as a dentist, and then, moving along through my life, not being good enough as being a husband, also being a dad as well. And I don't know, it was quite draining for me, but at the time it was actually normal. Like I didn't even realize it. And then in 2014, one of the assistants that we worked with, Kirsten, she was a good friend of mine. She took her own life. And for me, that was quite hard. I sort of put a lot of pressure on myself as to what I could have done better. Had a lot of regrets. And because of that, I made a decision that, I wouldn't want that to happen again in our practice. And so the following year, I became a practice owner, and I put in all this effort to change what we saw before, that team well-being. And, for some reason, I just still struggled. Like I felt that, the team was still the same, and I myself felt I was drowning, and it was some dark times. But, from that point, I'd started to realize, I guess, that I was the one that's struggling. Like I suffered from mental health issues. And, that's the reason why the team wasn't improving, is because I was contributing, I was weighing them down. And so from that, I got help, and I sort of spent a lot of time learning about what I could do to get better, I guess, with my mindset and my mental well-being. And it's been a long journey, and it's a daily practice. But, for me, it's sort of brought a balance to my life. And I think that's the reason why we're both excited to be here to sort of share, because it did have, it's sort of night and day. And from that, like as a business owner, like the team sort of followed as well. Like, Chirag does work with me. So hopefully that's one of the reasons why he's staying, because, it's taken time, but, just by just working on that individual well-being, slowly over time, you can influence the team, I guess, and others around you. But yeah, so that's my story.
Thanks, Viet. So my story is a little bit different to Viet's story, but it started similarly. So I also graduated in the same class as Viet in 2005. And I guess, so my kind of story with mental health and well-being started well before that, obviously. I'd say, like, I kind of always had this thing growing up, and I think a lot of dentists and anyone out there will relate to this, that I always had this pressure to kind of, succeed. So there's this strong pressure from a young age to get good results. So at school, to get good results, even to get into the right sporting team. And that kind of carried on into uni. So that was always kind of the rhetoric that I grew up with. And I've seen this in hindsight. I didn't know that at the time. So I was always getting my happiness from achieving, from doing well. And I think a lot of people, who end up at uni, in these kind of high stress professions may relate to that. So yeah, fast forward to uni, and I was doing all right. I was a complete nerd, so I was killing it. Like it wasn't that difficult to get good grades. So I was getting the results. So I was feeling happy, and also, I felt like I'd reached the pinnacle. By graduating as a dentist, you feel good. So I thought that I was doing really well. But there was obviously like a few little bits and bobs of anxiety that creeping in. But for me, it kind of hit me harder after graduating, because coming into the real world, I could no longer achieve those results, because, getting that kind of validation from straight A's or straight distinctions, it wasn't coming. And I found, real life was so different in terms of getting results. Of course, you get little things like, when you first graduate, the bank account goes up a bit, you feel good. You may have a relationship or this or that, and you feel good. But for me, I guess now I can say I was blessed to go through this. I wasn't achieving to the heights that I wished for, and hence I wasn't feeling good. So fast forward, slowly but surely, I was kind of getting drained and burnt out, kind of ground down by life. And yeah, fast forward to the same event. I was working with Viet when we lost Kirsten, and she was my DA on the weekends. And for me, that was the straw that broke my back in terms of my mental health and well-being. Like, it really affected us, and especially because I think I won't speak of Viet, but we related to her. I think, yeah, we related to her personality. Like, she was at dental school and a very high achiever, and yeah, I could just relate to it. I could relate to the fact that there was suffering underneath, but on the surface, I was very high functioning. So, and nobody could tell that I was suffering from this anxiety that was just gnawing away at me. And I was covering it with socializing, traveling, work and relationships and everything. But deep down inside, there was this kind of suffering going on. So I got very lucky in that as in my story is a bit different. It's a little bit esoteric. I got lucky and got an intuition to buy a one-way ticket to India. And this is around 2014, 15. And the reason I did that was because I was feeling so unfulfilled that I actually couldn't continue anymore. So I quit the job and my timing wasn't great. It was when Viet just became an owner. So
short stops.
Yeah. So luckily we maintained our friendship. But no, he actually encouraged me to pursue these things. And so yeah, I bought that ticket because essentially I was looking for fulfillment. I didn't know how or what mode that was going to come, but yeah, I did follow that intuition, and I got to say I felt blessed to be in the position to quit a job and travel overseas on a one-way ticket with no intention of coming back until I found my answer. In the end, the journey spanned 18 months, so it's a really long time to be away. But as I said, I was never going to come back until I found that fulfillment, or at least the tools for that fulfillment. So yeah, the journey started in North India, and then it spanned over different continents. I just went where the wind took me. So Sri Lanka, Nepal, California, the UK, and then back to India again. So I spent the most of my time in Northern India, like you can see in these photographs, and Nepal. So I spent about 9 months there, and I got lucky because I got to immerse myself in some really ancient Eastern kind of healing modalities. But to keep it simple, like I got to do like things like meditation courses, which lasted sometimes 10 days on a stretch, where some of you might have heard of the Vipassana course, which is quite popular around the world. I got a lot out of that. And some yoga courses, which went for 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm just practicing, not only the physical side of things, but also the more philosophical side of things, which really greatly aided me in the healing. So I then got lucky. Fast forward, I got a phone call from Viet. Actually, I was in India at the time, and he said, "When are you coming back, mate?" And luckily, serendipitously, can't say that word. English wasn't my first language, yeah, I actually was booking a ticket back when he called up and said, "Hey, how about coming back for 2 days a week?" It's perfect timing. So I came back, and I guess I'm mentioning that because I felt lucky. I got to take all that I learned over there and to start applying it to life here. So I want to make this point. It's not like I was cured and then I came back. It was that I got the tools in my tool belt to be able to come back and start applying these things. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why Viet and I do this, because I feel really blessed and lucky to have personal experience of these things working. And yeah, I'd love to share them. Yeah, thanks.
No, thanks, Ray. All right. So before we sort of go into the tools and everything, the practical component, we always like to start off with getting everyone on the same page about what mental health and mental well-being and what it's all about. And what we've found whenever we've done this sort of word association in our workshops is that when we say the words mental health, it sort of triggers a negative response. So words that come to mind are anxiety, depression, suicide. And the thing is, those things are more related to mental illness. And now, mental illness is quite prevalent in the world today. And unfortunately, it's getting worse. And these stats, paint a picture. And these are before COVID as well. Now, we always strongly advocate that if you are suffering from mental illness, to always seek professional help. And unfortunately, that's not what we're all about here. We're probably looking more at prevention of mental illness. But yeah, so look, because of the fact that when these words get triggered, when we think of mental health, we make this assumption that if we look at ourselves and we say that, because I'm not anxious, I'm not depressed, I'm actually okay, which isn't correct, because that's essentially like, if I'm going to use a dental analogy for everyone, it's like when a patient comes in and saying, oh, I don't have any toothache, that means that my teeth are okay. But we know that, severe toothache is up one end and a sound tooth is down the other. And there's this big range in between that the majority of people fall in. And that's the same with mental illness and mental health. So it's this range in between that the majority of us sit, like Chirag and myself as well. And this range is where we suffer mental health problems. And, we believe that unfortunately we're sort of unconscious to it, because we've sort of lived with these mental health problems our whole lives, that it's become part of life. And sometimes we feel it's part of us, like that's who we are. But we want to get across that, it doesn't have to be that way. We can live a better life, I guess. Just an example of possible signs of mental health problems. There's this list here, and if you can see it on your phone, maybe a bit small, but things such as like reactive communication, like getting a bit angry, sensitivity to criticism, constantly lost in your thoughts, sometimes low energy, problem sleeping, bad eating habits, drinking as well, things like that. Like they're possible signs, I guess. And it's not to say that, everyone who does this has got mental health issues. But the thing is, like, sometimes over a long period of time, if we're not aware of it, it can lead to things such as mental illness. So why work on mental well-being for ourselves? So I think it's something that it makes sense for us, but I feel like some people don't put as much time into it. And I think what we need to understand is a lot of times when we have things that cause us stress, like events or circumstances, for instance, running late. I think a lot of people have said that. Sometimes you run late, but the feeling, the stress you get is different, right? So I know, like, sometimes, like, if I run late at the end of the day is different to the beginning of the day, things like that. Or another example is when you go to work on the first day of the week to the last day, like, it's still work, but we feel different towards it. And so it's this understanding that, sometimes it's not the event that causes stress. It's our thoughts around the event, around the circumstances that's causing us the stress. So that means that we have some sort of control over it, right? It's our mindset, our perspective of things. So the way we look at it, like our mental well-being, our level of mental well-being is like a filter of how we view life. So therefore, if you are able to improve it, like, you can improve how we view life. And, so commonly, like, when you have that positive sort of mindset, you sort of see more positive things in your life, and the opposite is true as well. And this is backed by science studies and brain work and things like that. But that's just a quick example why, we should be putting the time in, I guess. Why work on mental well-being for our relationships? So this is related to sort of connection and so forth. And I think a way to illustrate this is I'm going to use an example of my daughter, Chloe. So Chloe's 6 years old, and I don't know if there's a lot of parents listening. She's like a real sweet girl, real kind, real caring. If you meet her, she like leaves me like love notes, things like that. So really good kid. And I'm not saying to brag, but I'm saying it to basically show how much stress can affect someone. So when she gets stressed or angry, she's like a totally different kid. Like she storms off, goes into the room, slams the door, doesn't want to talk, or she snaps at her older brother. So like we look at her and we go, oh geez, that's not the best way to handle stress, right? But the thing is, are we truly that different as adults? Like, when we get angry and stressed, we get a bit snappy at people. Sometimes we sort of isolate from others because we're so frustrated at them. And, those sort of things. Like, it's just crazy that when we look at a kid, we go, oh, like she could handle that better, but we don't see that we're doing that ourselves, and we're burning relationships because of that. Because I know when she's like that, I'm like, man, I don't want to be around that. Like, it's not a good vibe. Like, but that's what's happening day in, day out that we're sort of blind to. So, if we are able to improve our mental well-being, we can sort of manage our emotions a lot better. And that's when we sort of communicate better, and we have those stronger relationships. So, yeah. All right.
Thanks, Viet. So now that we've had a look at the general information around mental health and well-being, we're going to now focus a bit more on our approach to this, and also we're going to talk about specifically with dentistry. Okay. So I'm going to just go across. So yes, look, life is already stressful as it is. So before I go into the profession, so we've got financial stress, relationship stress, being a parent stress. I'm sure that's a big one right now, especially
massive.
Yeah, to the people down south who are suffering, with the homeschooling, and so it's like there's I can't imagine how difficult it is. And then we all chose this profession. No matter where you are in the profession, if you're from a dentist, oral health therapist, hygienist, management, my goodness, shout out to the managers. I know how difficult that can be. So, in auxiliary staff, no matter where you are in dentistry, it's a really stressful profession. So we are speaking to everyone, in the profession, not just dentists. But yeah, the biggest feedback we got, thanks for your feedback, guys, as well, when you registered. The biggest feedback we got was what we came up with as well. This list was made up about 6 months ago, and time management was our first one as well. So that was the one that was the most common. So I won't go through everything there. I think the slide kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? We have a special profession. There's a lot of things there. And we'll go through when we go through the tools that we're going to talk about to help. We'll use this slide again to go through some examples. But I think, so there, from a clinical dentist point of view, which is what I am, there's many things on this list. But I think Viet was going to mention some of the management issues as well.
Yeah, so obviously being a practice owner, some people don't know it, but if you're an owner, you do. And HR is always sort of top of the list. And I always feel for my practice manager, having to handle HR and that. So I think it's something that I think just when you deal with people, and unfortunately that's a big part of the job, like people, patients, it's always tricky. So I know HR is one of the tricky ones because, we're trying to improve, but there's some people that sometimes a bit resistant, I guess, and things like that. But yeah, a lot of stress.
Yeah, a lot of stress. So what's our approach? So when we approached this, we found that these kind of things were like a general approach to your mental health and well-being, and these have been around for as long as I can remember. I think since uni. I think these are all fairly obvious things. I think most people already know this without doing any research. Things like adequate rest and diet and exercise and family and friends and work-life balance. So I think they're all relatively obvious things. So the question that we had, that if this is so obvious, and I know I don't do all these things, but if it's so obvious, how come I'm not doing these things, and what's blocking me from doing these things? And why is everyone not doing these things? So we felt there's something missing because, why is it that like the stats are so alarming? The stats that you went through earlier, I think these stats are, only rising in these current times. So what are we missing? Like, it prompted us to talk about it. And obviously it prompted me to quit my job and go overseas. I wanted to look to see like what was missing, in this journey of mental well-being. So we kind of came up with our own, after we discussed what we both learned, we came up with a recipe. And really important point before I go on, you can see there's an acronym there, which is MASK. I'm going to be, I'm a witness to this. This is Viet's creation, this acronym. And I promise you, he did this well before COVID. I think it was sometime in 2019. So it was before COVID existed. So this is not a play on COVID, but it happens to be, pretty relevant right now. And we do have a lot of other, of course, metaphors with this acronym, which we won't go through today. But these are the four kind of steps we found, which helped us kind of build a foundation for our approach to mental health and well-being, which of course feed into the general approach, but also have a far, reaching benefits. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try and define these for you. And then later on go through some tools on how to develop these as well. And normally this is about a 2.5, 3 hour part of our workshop, which I'm going to do in 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of forgiveness that it may be a bit quick, because some of these topics are really deep, like, and they're a bit new agey, a bit wishy-washy, mindfulness and self-worth, all these words we hear. But upon our discussions, we were like, holy moly, these are it. Like, so we found that these were the most helpful for us. So we thought, let's start opening up a discussion. So normally we do this in a discussion basis. So as I said, forgive me, this will be a little bit fast, but I'll try to define them. So the first one, I'm going to try and keep it really simple. Mindfulness, we've all heard that word, I think, recently. It's very new age, but in fact, this word has been around for millennia. It's been around for a long, long time. I encountered it a lot when I was chilling with, the people with the ancient wisdom in India. They just called it something else. But yeah, so what is mindfulness? To keep it really simple, I'm going to call it just being present in the moment. And then we'll throw in the extra bit of non-judgmentally, okay? And I'm just going to check that to make sure. Good. Just close that. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so it's just being present. And moving forward, I'll go to the next slide. Well, let's try and apply this to examples. Okay. So let's imagine a scenario. I think we've all been in this scenario before and all witnessed it if we're, auxiliary staff and management. Let's picture it's 10 a.m. I've got a full book of patients. I had a gap, but someone's booked in a toothache, and it's a broken 4-6. I've got half an hour. The next patient is on RCT, and I've got a really busy day ahead. And the RCT is really difficult. It's a difficult patient of mine. So patient comes in, and I go, have a look at the tooth, and it's doable. Patient wants an extraction. And it's doable. And being a bit of a hero today, and I reckon I can do it. So it looks like a bit of a no-brainer on the X-ray. Everything's fine. So I attempt extraction, and I think we all can see where the story is going. You go in there, and it snaps, and that big sigh of relief. Sorry, not relief. Sigh of stress comes through, and you go, "Oh God, what am I going to do?" So now you're already 15, 20 minutes in the appointment. You've got 10 minutes left to get out this broken mesial root, and you're feeling pretty stressed. That's the first thing that's going to happen. So you're going to feel pretty stressed. And I know in my time, what would happen is I'd start thinking of the next patient, going, oh no, they're going to wait. It's an RCT, which is really difficult. I'm starting to feel stressed about what does the patient think of me? What does my nurse think of me? What does the patient out the front think of me? A lot of stress starts happening. I'm starting to lose my center. And then really I'm quite flustered. So there's a physiological reaction first, which is just your normal fight or flight, which we'll go through later, but there's this additional completely being pulled out of the moment. So that's an example to try. Remember, I'm trying to define mindfulness. That's called not being mindful, because now I've gone from doing extraction to thinking about what patients in the waiting room think of me. I might even go into the past and think of the time when I did this last time and how, oh, I've done it again. I'm kicking myself. And now I've got a rhetoric of, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not a good dentist. So, I've got all this stuff going on, and I've still got this measly root to get out in about 4 minutes now. I've got left to take this tooth out. And this patient is quite demanding. And in fact, for the example, the patient was kind of a bit coercive in convincing me to get the tooth out. They were a bit pushy, and that's why I kind of succumbed to it. I did, a little voice told me not to do it, to maybe get an OPG and get him back, but I kind of, for this example's purpose, I got kind of almost convinced to do it, okay, against my own will. That's important for later. So that's, going to eventually have an effect on my mental well-being, right? I'm not going to feel very good, and I'm going to feel pretty drained. Now, fast forward, I get the tooth out. Luckily, I'm now half an hour late. We got it out, we sewed it up, and get the next patient in. And now I'm still thinking about the last one. So I'm not really doing my root canal anymore, am I? I'm not focusing on the root canal. I'm focusing on the last patient. And now I'm focusing on my nurse. She's getting a bit antsy because she wants lunch, because now we know we're going to enter our lunch break. So again, I've been pulled out of the present moment. So see how this kind of, with mindfulness, you get pulled out and it's really hard to come back. So my whole dental day can go like that, right? For this example. So the whole day can be just in the head and not doing what's right in front of us. So that's, an example of not being mindful. I'll very quickly go through, well, what is mindful? So same example, tooth breaks. Look, I'm not saying you're not going to get stressed. Of course you're going to get stressed. That's normal. That would be a normal response. So normal response, the fight or flight kicks in, but I just take a moment, and we'll go through later on the tools on how to do this, but I take a moment to just have a look at what's in front of me. I'm being present. So, broke the tooth. And I'm able to just, rather than going through all that inner dialogue, I'm able to just focus on what's in front of me. Maybe I'll go across to wash my hands and just take a moment, and we'll go through that later. And then just manage the situation without letting my mind go so far into the future or the past. I'm able to handle what's in front of me and go through it. What we propose is that, with that, your mental health and well-being will be better. You won't suffer so much. I'm going to go through the science of that a bit later. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding that, we have a certain amount of energy, I guess, and, we have a choice what to do with that energy. And a lot of times we sort of, like Chirag said, we sort of use that energy to think about, what's going to happen in the future or in the past. And that's the same with any role. Like obviously, Chirag gave a dentist example, but as a DA, they think about the stereo they got to do, the impression they got to pour up. On front desk, they think about different phone lines. There's a patient waiting. The practice manager, obviously, there's a massive to-do list. Someone's just called in sick and all these other things. So sometimes you can get caught up thinking about stuff that you can't control, and rather than focusing on what you can control, which is what is happening in the present moment right now.
Yeah, thanks.
So this next one is appreciation or gratitude. I think we also know what gratitude is. Chirag sort of enlightened me to a quick description of it a year ago. And it's essentially having a great attitude. So just a really positive perspective on what is happening. So I think it's something that we probably don't do enough of. Unfortunately, we sort of focus on the negatives in day-to-day life, I guess. And, I think it's a good habit to build. And the reason for that is, there's a lot of science behind the benefits of it. The second one there, the fact that it blocks toxic emotions, they sort of say that you can't, gratitude and the toxic emotions that you have, like anger and resentment, can't reside in the same space. So if I'm angry at someone for something, but then I'm able to develop a sense of gratitude for them, then that anger generally can't be there. I use a lot with my kids. So just with parenting, I think parenting is a big part of my life. So a lot of this has helped with that. But yeah, so, you know, an example of, you know, what you could do to sort of develop the gratitude is, I'm sure you've all heard, just writing down at the end of the day 3 things you're grateful for. And I think it's just retraining your brain to see that positive. Sometimes it's also nice just in a team. I think we don't show gratitude enough for the people who help us through each day. So just, you know, giving a genuine thank you to your nurse, your dentist, your practice manager for what they do. I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
All right. So the third aspect of mask is self-worth. So this is another big one, which I'm going to attempt to unpack very quickly. So we'll try and define it first. Self-worth, I'm going to keep it really simple. It's just your opinion of yourself, but it's based on your opinion alone. It's how you feel about yourself based on your opinion, not based on someone else's opinion. And importantly, not based on your achievements. So we're going to call that still external. So this is your opinion of yourself, regardless of any achievement in your life. It's just how you feel about yourself. Okay. So obviously with that, we try and look at what are the options. So it ranges from low self-worth, the rhetoric of I don't feel good enough, all the way up to high self-worth or worth, I feel worthy. There's of course the extra step of feeling better than you actually are, like a superior complex, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk more just about feeling worthy and not feeling worthy. Okay. So we'll just try and unpack it slowly. So why are 2 dentists talking about self-worth on a Wednesday night? Why are we doing this? So when we brainstormed this a couple of years ago, we actually stumbled upon it and found that this was actually probably the most vast and rich topic in this field of mental well-being. All 4 are important, but this one was really, you know, rich and vast. So we're going to try and unpack why, and also to keep defining it. So why? Because it's the underlying driver of action. So we'll go through the example in a second, but basically how you feel about yourself pretty much determines your thoughts, and your thoughts determine your speech, and your speech determines your actions. So there is a clear thing that if you feel good about yourself, you're going to tend to do good actions that are going to compound and benefit you greatly, and vice versa, right? So the action then that you take will determine the course of your life, right? So that's why we think it's really important, because we think this kind of inner rhetoric of how worthy you feel and what that results in is going to change your life in one direction or another. So let's look at the example. So what does unhealthy, self-worth look like? So the compound effect of low worth. So if I don't feel I'm enough, well, then I probably won't eat healthy and probably won't hit the gym. We're talking about the general approach to self-health here. To mental well-being. So that will then compound, because my poor eating habits will then make me more unhealthy, which will make me feel worse about myself, which will not get me to the gym any faster, right? So that's a really simple look at low worth, but it's not, we feel it's not that simple. It's actually a bit more complex. And this is probably the one which maybe a lot of professionals fall into. And it's this outsourcing of self-worth. So kind of what I said in my example, how, growing up, like I was constantly outsourcing my self-worth to what grades I was getting, to what sporting team I was in, and to also how I performed on the sporting field. Did I score a goal that day? Did we win? So, a lot of the time, like my mood was completely dependent on that external thing. Now, of course, no one wants to lose. I mean, it's okay to lose. It's okay to feel sad if you lose a game. But if it's determining your overall well-being, then maybe there's some deeper issues going on. So some other examples, like I think in the modern day with people, maybe people with, with how many likes or followers they're getting on their social media, people with their bank balance maybe not being where they thought it should be. So, or, say the stocks go up, they feel happy, and they're feeling really worthy. But then when those same stocks go down, they feel not very good about themselves. Like, for example, I think during the GFC, in America, so many people lost their lives through mental health issues, because their whole life is just based on their work. So that's what I mean by outsourcing self-worth. It's a huge trap because it's not true worthiness. It's a worthiness which is completely dependent upon certain circumstances going away, which you can't always control. Okay. So we try and like look at maybe some yardsticks or like a litmus test for self-worth in the dental setting. So we'll go through and maybe just, again, this is to define and to just understand self-worth a bit better. So we'll go through our example for a few of these. So you're back in the example where you're doing the extraction and you've just broken the tooth. So if you look at the inner critic, so one with perhaps a lower sense of worth, you can imagine the dialogue. It might be, you know, I'm not good enough. I'm not a good dentist. So I've done it again. Like am I good enough for this profession? You know, like I've had these thoughts as, you know, I'll be honest, when I graduated, like breaking a tooth in the first couple of years, you know, losing sleep over it, really thinking, am I good enough to get through this? One with perhaps a more healthy sense of worth would be like, hey, you know, this has happened. You know, it could have been from something I've done wrong, but I'm going to learn from it. But they'll be able to not take it so personally and not take it so to heart. They can look at it rationally and go, well, teeth break. This is going to happen. And, you know, it's not that I'm not good enough. It's just that I'm a new grad. I'm learning, you know, dentistry. Just going to check that. Don't check that raised hand thing. Sorry, guys. No, it's all good. Okay. Sorry. So my example, where was I? The inner critic. So yeah, so one with a healthy worth will be able to kind of manage that a little bit better. Okay. Now these things are just dynamic, right? It's not all or nothing. It's very dynamic. So with the people pleasing and lack of boundaries, I'm going to go back to the example. Remember I said maybe the patient kind of convinced you to take that tooth out in that moment, even though like it was kind of against your intuition. And again, this is more for, I guess, new grads. And I went through this many times when I was a new grad, and just even 5 years out, 6 years out, where I could be convinced to do something which I know I shouldn't be doing. So in that way, why was I doing it? So maybe a sense of low self-worth where I'm people pleasing, where I want to please the patient because I want them to like me. So that would be one kind of level of low worth. But perhaps one with a higher worth would not be coming from that people pleasing place. They'd be like, look, you know, I can get the tooth out, but I've only got half an hour and it may not be enough time. And they'll be able to communicate that quite smoothly to the patient because their agenda is not based on a low worth. Their agenda is, you know, they're not trying to gain worth from external things. They're already feeling worthy, so that they're actually able to approach things probably a lot more rationally. And that's really similar to lack of boundaries. So if you're allowing a person to convince you to do something, you've allowed them to violate your boundary. So it's about, you know, one with a healthy sense of worth is able to set boundaries and express their truth with the people pleasing thing. And one with maybe an unhealthy worth is unable to express what they actually feel and set a boundary. Okay. With perfectionism, I think that's probably speaks for itself in our field. Yeah, you've broken the tooth, you're not feeling very good, right? It wasn't very perfect. But it can go across to, you know, crown preps and fillings and anything. We have a myriad of things to choose from. And I think you guys get it. Like say low worth, you're going to be constantly trying to be perfect and then beat yourself up for it when you don't hit that, you know, very, very far goalpost that you've chosen for yourself. Whereas one with a healthier worth understands that there is a lot of perfection in imperfection. So that they've understood that perfectionism is quite far off the parabola. Okay. The last one, sensitivity to feedback and criticism. I think a good example, rather moving away from our example a little bit, but going to the one where we mentioned the management team and HR. You know, I think you guys will probably deal with this on a daily basis, having to maybe give feedback or criticism to a staff member, whether it be a dentist or auxiliary or whoever. That can be quite tricky. So this works on both sides, the one giving the feedback and the one receiving it. So we'll talk about the one receiving it. One with a low sense of self-worth, maybe very quick to defend, very quick to, as Viet will mention later, get their kind of sword up and shield and protect themselves and fight back without really listening to what the person's saying. which makes it very difficult for the management team. And one with a high worth will be able to actually listen to the feedback, take it on. I'm not saying they have to believe it. They can at least just give the person time to listen without forming a judgment, without being defensive initially, and just hear the person out first. And then, because of their sense of self-worth, will probably have the skill to communicate their feelings on the topic as well. And hopefully the management team have the skill to listen to the other person. So this is obviously a two-way street with feedback and criticism. Okay. So I think that's it for self-worth for now. But again, we would unpack that a lot more. Thank you for letting me speak through that.
Yeah. All right. The last one is kindness and service. I think once again, another one just like Gertrude, it's sort of self-explanatory. And I think, going back, well, just to quickly go through it, obviously it's doing kind things for others and helping others, but it comes back to the intention, right? So it's sort of, as Shrai was talking about before, with people pleasing, you're doing things for others, but for your own benefit, because you want something in return. You want validation, you want appreciation. So true kindness and service is helping others, but without any expectation of anything in return. Is purely the intention is to help. And and I feel like a lot of people do that. And in our industry, it's a health service, I guess. So it's about doing it purely for the patient and doing what's right for the patient. But yeah, and then this sort of goes back to what I said before about gratitude, just giving thanks, just being kind. I think we don't do enough of that in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can see someone's raising their hand. We will answer questions at the end. If you do have a question, feel free to type it out in the chat for the Q&A section. I think if that's why you're raising your hand.
Unless you're doing this.
Yeah, not sure. But yeah, sorry, I got distracted before. Okay, so we're going to talk now about these tools to help implement mask. Now, these three on the screen, you can see introspection, journaling, breathing, and meditation. Interestingly, these are the techniques that I was learning when I was overseas. And by the way, Viet and I weren't communicating as much during that time. So we didn't know that we were both going through the same thing at the same time, which is why this was interesting. But I was practicing these three techniques in India, and Viet was practicing, I believe, the same things here through his research. So that's why we found it really interesting that after really nutting it out and talking about it, that these were the three big ones that came up. So that's why we've included that these are our tools that we've got. Of course, there's other tools as well. Like Viet said importantly before in kind of a disclaimer that, of course, we are big advocates and we support counseling and things like that. I think it's super important. These are just adjunct tools for when on your own and in terms of prevention and management of well-being. So introspection and journaling, the first one. This one I think is super important because, look, as scientists, I think we all need to know what the issue is before we can solve the problem. It's good to have a starting point. So for me, I think introspection is great just to see where you're at. So let's see how mindful we're being. And you can just tell by what you write down in terms of your feelings around a certain topic. Like if you were to journal about your day at work when you broke the tooth, you'll see as you write where I'm being mindful, and you'll definitely see where your self-worth is at. It'll come up. And I can share, my journey, the 18-month trip, I journaled a lot. And it was really interesting. I actually noticed just instead of, it wasn't the information I was writing down, it was the pattern that I could see. And the biggest pattern on the open was I am not enough. And that's what I noticed. And I was like, wow, that's I didn't know that was my rhetoric until I actually journaled. So I think that's why journaling is good, because it's you get all your thoughts down and you can stop that kind of anxious loop that's going on. And by just seeing the thoughts on paper, I think that's when we can start to make progress to cut into it. So the first thing is see where you're at with mask. And secondly, you can see your progress. That's the beautiful thing about journaling. You can see how your internal dialogue is shifting over time. I know when we first started this, Viet and I did an exercise where we pretended to be ourselves 8 years ago and write down our feelings after a day of work. And then we did the same for today. And the difference was remarkable. So I think that's what it was just good to see it down on paper and be like, wow, that's, how I was feeling. So that's why I think introspection is great.
I think,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I was just going to say, like, sometimes when we're going through struggles and stuff, like we, want to open up to someone, like, when you share it with someone, um, sometimes a weight gets lifted off your shoulders, right? It feels nice to actually say it. Sometimes we don't have those people around, and by journaling, it's putting that on paper, and so that you're getting it, you're lifting that weight yourself. You can actually see it yourself, I guess. So,
yeah, for sure. So next we're going to talk about conscious breathing. We're going to spend a bit more time on this one because we feel like this one is a bit of a silver bullet in this whole journey. The reason being, you can use it anywhere, anytime, and any day. You don't have to pull up your yoga mat and start meditating at work. You've got the ability to do this anytime, which is why it's so important. So we're going to break it down a little bit with a bit of science first, and then we'll go through, and maybe we've got time, do a quick exercise as well, which should be good. Yeah. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about the nervous system first. So we've got this thing called the autonomic nervous system. I think we all have heard of that at uni and even in high school biology. We've got the rest and digest and the fight or flight. So we've got the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic. So why am I talking about these? If you're faced with one of these guys, you're going to need your physiology to kick in to be able to either fight it, which was very brave, or bolt and get out of there. I know which one I'll be doing. I'll be bolting. So you need your body to have the ability to do this, which is why we have this amazing physiology where we can have a fight or flight response to get out of danger. So why are we talking about lions? Well, in the modern day, we're not faced with these guys, but there's different lions, right? So we've got all the stresses that we mentioned before. We've got, this COVID, financial stress, being a parent, and that thing called dentistry, the thing we've been talking about, that, little stressful job that we have. So there's already so many threats that we have, so many lions that are coming our way that our body is kind of reacting to. And then you throw in dentistry, and more, I think very often, this is what hasn't been discussed, that dentistry can be the straw that breaks the camel's back, okay? So we'll go back to our example. So you're already stressed by life and you're at work and you've just broken that tooth. So that is the line, that's the threat. So your fight or flight's going to kick in because it needs to for you to get that tooth out. So this is a good thing, right? Initially, your sympathetic nervous system's triggered, and great, you've got some adrenaline and you're going to be able to focus with all these physiological changes. The problem is basically because we weren't mindful and we weren't able to get out of this mode. When the next patient's in, we're still stressed from that previous line, but we're also thinking about this current one in the chair. In dentistry, it's always stressful. On a tough day, there's always these threats coming at you. So the body can't always be in fight or flight. It then goes to this kind of secondary response where you get cortisol. So think of it like a car. The initial foot on the accelerator is the sympathetic nervous system being triggered, but then you've got this thing that it's like cruise control, keeps the foot down, and that's the cortisol. So you constantly have these stress hormones in your body, and the body can stay revved up all day. I mean, I know when I was a new grad, it would be into the night and the next day, but for now, all day until you get home, have a shower, finally relax, as long as the kids aren't, annoying you too much, and you are able to get into rest or digest mode. So your parasympathetic nervous system comes back into play and you're able to just chill because your body can go through these physiological changes. So why are we talking about this? If we're overstimulated and we are full of cortisol, like I think a lot of dentists are, you can end up looking like this puppy. I think a picture tells 1,000 words. I don't need to go through all the words there. You end up looking like this poor puppy who's had a tough day. That's me on a Friday after a long day and looking forward to the weekend. Need a bit of rest and digest. So can we reduce these effects? Like, can we, because we can't keep doing this, right? Like, is there a way of consciously initiating the brakes, right? To get that foot off the accelerator and pump the brakes a bit. And the good news is there is. We said it's the autonomic nervous system, implying it's automatic. But there's one cool thing about breathing. You can do it autonomically, but you can also do it consciously. So The answer is to relax the nervous system using the breath. Okay. So what's the science real quick? We all learned about the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a nerve that runs all the way from the head and neck right down to your diaphragm. And the idea is that this nerve is actually responsible for starting the parasympathetic nervous system, so for initiating it. So we can actually trigger it using our breath, but not a short breath, which we have in our fight or flight. The short breath's at the top, but by doing a really deep diaphragmatic breath or a belly breath, which we've all heard, I think. So by doing the breathing deeply from your belly, you're able to actually initiate that parasympathetic nervous system response and switch on the rest and digest yourself. So now imagine if you've got this scenario where you've broken the tooth. Imagine if you can just take a second, go to the and wash your hands, take your gloves off, and just wash your hands, and just do a minute of this breathing, where you do a minute of belly breathing. You're going to be able to actually hack your own physiology, and you're going to be able to switch on, well, at least dampen the fight or flight, and start initiating that rest and digest, which is going to help your body physiology greatly. Because the thing is, a broken tooth is not a lion. You don't need to run. You don't need that increase of heart rate. You can actually do it calmly. And that's the whole point. Okay. Now, I think maybe let's maybe not do, I think it's about 9 o'clock already. Should we keep going, or do you want to do
we can keep going. Maybe just give examples
Okay.
to show how to do it.
Well, yeah, we were going to do we usually do a 5 or 10 minute breathing exercise. I think it's 9 o'clock, around tonight. Let's not do it now, but just basically, like I said, the short breathings from your chest and the belly breathings from your belly. So when you're breathing, the idea is when you inhale, you want to hope that your lower hand comes out a little bit. Okay, so you breathe in, and your lower, if you want to know if it's diaphragmatic breath, your lower hand will move. If you're breathing short, only your top hand will move. The idea with this box breathing exercise, I'll just give you verbally today. You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold again for 4 seconds, and then repeat the cycle. So it's pretty basic. You can look it up as well. You can literally try this tonight and tomorrow at work. But look, yeah, I know we've rushed through it, but really, this is for me, and I think this is the silver bullet. This breathing has remarkable results, and it's not just around fight or flight and things like that. There's a lot deeper, there's a lot more depth to it, which we won't go into today, but I think you'll see as you go on this journey, you'll discover it. Okay. So the last one, which I have 15 seconds to explain, the topic, which is again part of the silver bullet. I think they're aligned, meditation and breathing. But for today, I'm going to keep it very simple. If we think of doing weights and cardio as the exercise for fitness, meditation is the gym for being present, for mindfulness. Okay, which will in turn help your self-worth and also your gratitude and kindness. But yeah, for today, I'll just mention it. But again, obviously, we go into a lot more detail in other workshops.
All right. So obviously getting to the hour mark, and I'll just quickly touch on connection and related to that whole team dynamic, team well-being. I'll be very brief. Obviously another big topic, but it's just to understand that we all want these strong, deep, healthy connections in our relationships, but also in our team as well. But I think what we found is in the world today, there's a bit of a disconnect, right? And I think part of that is because there's so much stress in the world, it's sort of affecting how we communicate. And the example I'm going to use, I learned this from my son years ago. He went to a resilience course, and they taught him that problems don't get solved in the red zone. So obviously that's related to like when he gets overwhelmed, throws a tantrum, like you don't get anywhere. And obviously that's sort of related to what we spoke about today. Like, when you break that tooth, if you stay in that red zone, then you don't really fix anything. You just make it worse for yourself. But when it comes to connection, like, we can sort of elaborate with that, like extrapolate that even further and say that, problems don't get solved and connections don't build in the red zone. Like, to build these healthy connections, we need to be in the green zone, because there's a difference in how we communicate when we're stressed, anxious, frustrated, compared to, when we're calm. So ideally, to build these connections, you want both sides, both parties to be in the green zone, right? But sometimes we don't realize that we're in the yellow or red zone. And because, that's how we've lived our lives. But in order to get to the green zone, we need to apply things such as what Shrag just spoke about, like the conscious breathing, or even those mask principles. And so, ideally, you'd like both parties to have the skills and everything. Sometimes they don't, but as long as like, ideally, you can set the example by bringing yourself into the green zone yourself. Because if you stay in the red zone, chances are the other person will stay in the red zone as well. So we need to set an example. And this is obviously to people who, obviously to everyone and to every single relationship, but obviously I found it beneficial as an owner and, dealing with HR. It's just trying to maintain that green zone, because what that does, it starts to create this safe space, right? Where if you're always in the green zone, that means that people will build that sort of trust in you, and they feel like they can be vulnerable, a bit more authentic, and just be their actual selves. And we use the metaphor that they can take off their mask and be truly them. And I think that's where it starts, because I feel like we're just really reluctant to share our struggles and everything, because there is a lot of shame attached to that. So in order to get out of that, we need to create more of these safe spaces. And what better place to do that than a dental workplace, when there's so much stress and we need that support of each other, right? So it's a big thing, and it's tough if you've got bigger teams and things like that. But you as an individual can always start and set that example.
All right, thanks, Viet. We'll go through some final thoughts now, just to summarize everything. So obviously, Viet highlighted that mental health is critical in these modern times, especially, and then you're throwing out profession as well, and it makes things really difficult. And we believe that the strategy is a good start. It's a foundation to approach this issue. And hopefully by doing this, we get this extra benefit of not only helping ourselves, but we get a ripple effect of affecting the people close to us. So our family, our staff, and our patients, and ultimately the community. So we think, that old adage, it starts with yourself and it can spread. I think it's really powerful. And a really important point, I think we want to highlight that this isn't about curing mental issues or mental illnesses, or this is not what we're talking about. This is about a foundation to approach it. It's about a daily practice to manage it, because you can't just cure it and then live your life, because life's going to keep happening, right? So the idea is it's a daily practice, and it's something that I know I still practice every day, and I will need to for the rest of my life. So I think we just make that clear. It's not like a pill that you take and you're sweet. The idea is that it's a long-term thing.
Yeah,
that's it.
So totally agree.
Yeah. So maybe we'll answer some questions now.
Just to finish off, obviously you probably know our email address because you registered, and it's just to let you know that we're open to any, like, if you've got any further questions, like even if you sort of think of something tomorrow, or we also like hearing feel good stories, like if something sort of resonates and it's just made a difference in your life, awesome, we love hearing that as well. Just being aware that we also obviously we tried to cram like 6 hours worth of our workshop into this 1 hour for everyone, But for those out there who want to spend a bit more time, like whether it's your dental team or right now for dentists, feel free to reach out and we can sort of give you details and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there is a dental one for people in
Yeah.
Brisbane. Again, with the lockdown stuff, it's sad that we can't do it interstate, but there's one in Brisbane on October the 16th.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, we've got a few spots left there.
Yeah. So that's for dentists only, that one, for individual dentists. And then of course, if you're interested with for your team, there's, if you email us, we can talk about coming to the practice and talk to the whole team. Okay.